Bună seara, iertați-mă, nu sunt obișnuit cu microfoanele. Ce să am o voce mai... Încep ușor în română, după care voi schimba în engleză. Bine ați venit la Reforma Photo Days, este prima ediție a festivalului. Avem două expoziții care se derulează chiar acum. Una este Josef Polleross, Non-Subjective World, care și la atelier 030202 avem expoziția centrală cu aproape 20 de artiști, nu? So I will switch to English so everybody will understand. I made just a short introduction in Romanian. Thank you for coming tonight. Your Excellency, the Ambassador of Austria, thank you for coming. I will ask my colleague, the artistic director of the festival, to start the debate.
Thank you very much for being here. We also have two special guests tonight. Josef Polleross, you maybe have already heard about him. He's a very successful photojournalist and an artist, an Austrian artist, and we would like to thank the Austrian Cultural Forum for having him here, and Mr. Thomas Kloiber, the director of the Austrian Cultural Forum. And Mirela Momanu, an also very well-known Romanian photographer, specialized on street photography. I will make a short introduction of each of you, and as I said, ladies first. Mirela Momanu has started to make her first steps in photography in 2009, but since then she was a really successful and awarded photographer. She has co-founded 2011 a photo group focused on street photography. It's called the Photo Team Romania. She is also co-founder of an international photo group on Spot. With this group, she's also making some photographic walks to different cities, not only Bucharest, not only Romania, also international. Josef Polleross, if you will Google him, you will find it's very easy to find his photos. He has been published in, I think, the most important publications worldwide, starting with New York Times, Washington Post, Geo, Life, Stern, and the list continues. It's a pretty long list. So this is a short presentation of the two. And because I started with Mirela, now I will start with the first question with Josef. I wanted to ask you, during your successful career as photojournalism, how do you feel? Do you feel that that you have to be very lucky to be on the right spot, on the right moment to make the perfect photography?
Yes, certainly that's one of the main things. But photography and photojournalism has changed quite a bit. The great days were basically after the Second World War until the 70s, until the end of Vietnam War, where photography and photojournalism was really everywhere. And big magazines, Life and Look, Newsweek, Time, had lots of money and lots of funds to send photographers everywhere. And then when I started in '87 as a professional photographer, it still was well financed and people were going everywhere. It was always, basically there was a conflict and photographers flew in from wherever they were, mostly from Europe and from the United States. And you covered the conflict, you met the same people basically. If you were in Moscow for the Putsch in '91, it was always a group of international photographers you met. And this changed it until about after Rwanda basically changed. And the last straw was 2001 with September 11, because basically the financing collapsed. The funds were spent by most of the news magazines on the Iraq war. So the magazines didn't have any funding anymore for the rest of the year, very little, and all the advertising disappeared. because of the situation, advertising went down, so many magazines closed, especially travel magazines. I worked, at that point I worked already for travel magazines. I worked for the New York Times travel magazine, for Travel and Holiday in New York, and for Global in Munich, and all three of them closed within basically a year. So this was really the end of it. But I remember a friend, a Newsweek editor, a woman, she said she knew photojournalism was over when the cover of Newsweek with the death of Princess Diana sold more copies than any other cover of Newsweek. So basically she said with this she knew photojournalism and news coverage was basically finished or going downhill. And that's really what happened. And the digital revolution in 2000, around 2000, when the first cameras were cheap enough for photojournalists working freelance that they could afford it. This also changed the business quite a bit because it was easier, it was faster. You didn't have to process film, you could just transmit right away. And it meant also that images became cheaper. There was a lot more images going around. It started, in the beginning, was not that much competition, but because the cameras were still too expensive. But around 2008, when the cameras became quite cheap and very good quality, that meant there was an incredible amount of photography done by amateurs and professionals, and that meant also that the fees for photography just dropped dramatically. I remember, for example, there used to be, but you got maybe $250 for a resale image in a magazine. Now it's about $25. So, and sometimes even less, because you have to share it with the agency if it goes through an agency. So you get maybe $10, $12. And before you could live actually from reselling your work through the agency, if you did a story, it was resold, you actually made enough money to live from it. And this is not possible anymore. The only news coverage that still possible is done by wire services because they have the funding and they have very good photographers. The good part is that you have now photographers, very good photographers everywhere in the world. Before it used to, you had only really specialists in the US and in Western Europe and in some Eastern European countries. Hungary had a strong tradition, Czechoslovakia, so you had a tradition. And this changed now. You have everywhere good photographers, which is very good. And you cannot, it means it's a democratic situation now. And anywhere people can photograph and sell their work. They might not get much money for it, but at least they can cover, and events are covered instantly through telephones, which wasn't possible before. So you have certainly so much more access for people that didn't have access before. Okay? So it means the coverage worldwide is so much better than it ever was before, but it also means for photographers to make a living, it's close to impossible. So that's sort of the situation now. I mean, there are some agencies that are still very strong, like Magnum is still getting by. Noor is a young agency of 7. James Nachtwey, everybody knows him, he was 7. He founded 7 with a few other photographers. They still make a living, but when you think before, basically 80% of photojournalists, 75% could make a living. Now it's maybe 5 to 10% that really can make a living photographing for magazines or newspapers. So the situation has changed, and it means you have to be multi-talented, you have to be able to shoot stills, shoot film, make video cutting, and do also maybe radio. So it's basically a position that was done by 5, 6 people is done now by one person, and this is also a strain on somebody. The younger generation can do that because they're equipped to do it, but still it's very tough and difficult. So we all try to get by, trying to find different ways of trying to go more in the artistic section, or street photography still. But for me also street photography is becoming more difficult because in Romania, I'm sure it's not a problem yet, but in Austria and Germany, especially in Austria, there was a law passed that basically you cannot photograph anybody without asking for permission outside on the street. That means all the classic images, Cartier-Bresson or all the famous street photographers, it wouldn't be possible because you might get sued, you might get, and people just go up to you, why are you taking a picture? So it's sort of, for me, it's not fun anymore, just taking on the street. And I talked also to Cornell, photographer here, very good Romanian photographer, and he told me the same thing. He doesn't want to get bothered by people just telling him, why are you taking my picture? Before, people didn't mind or didn't ignore you. And now everybody's photographing, everybody's posting everything, things you would never have posted or shown before. But if you photograph somebody on the street, you might have problems. So the situation has changed quite a lot. And but there's still, for young photographers, there's still ways. And if you have an interesting vision and maybe some money in the background or family that supports you, then you can start out and try to succeed.
Because you said that the number of the photographers is still growing. I would have a question for both of you. How important do you think are the technical aspects? Can you get good photos with your phone, or do you need a specialized camera, or isn't it? So the technical aspect is important, or the eye is more important?
I'll take the lead. Thank you very much, Roxana, and thank you, Razvan, also. This is a very good question, especially for myself, because I have never read the camera manual. I'm very honest, I have never read the camera manual. Everything I learned, I stole from the others. Why? Because I love the image. I love how to see the world. I love to interpret it. And for me, the camera is actually an extension of the eye. Yes, I didn't read the manual, but I love to discover, so I used my curiosity to navigate through the menu of each camera I had and to discover more and more options. And but these days, I just made a step forward. I started some portrait photography and some commercial photography, and yes, technical aspects are very important, especially when you want to capture the details, when you have to work with special lights. It's very important to know your camera. But on the other side, in street photography, you can have great images with the SLR, with a reflex camera. You can have outstanding images with a mirrorless camera, with a compact camera, and even with your phone. Why? Because I was talking to Josef before. Right now we are in an era of everything is online. You can immediately take a photo and upload it, and to be seen by a lot of people. So I think we are living in a very, very high speed of consuming images. So most probably the valuable one and the one who has power to transmit whatever we saw and we felt are to be printed, are to be put in the books, and are to be shown in festivals to educate people how to see a photograph, how to react, and how to interpret whoever presented that image.
Josef, what's your point of view?
Since I've been doing it for quite a long time, I started in '82. Basically, I was trained as a black and white printer and processing black and white images in New York. And I worked in a darkroom from '82 to '87 for 5 years. 1 year I worked in one of the top labs in Manhattan, printing for Magnum and Marielle Mark and other famous, Cavolo, other famous photographers. And so I've been doing this, and it's quite intense and complicated to do good black and white printing using black and white film. But for me, the digital is actually I don't regret going back to the analog, I must say, because the digital offers much better quality. It certainly has a different look from analog film. I shot black and white film and I shot slide film, always together, both at the same time normally. But for me, it's using the computer is basically the same as I used to be in a darkroom. Some of the images, the black and white images in the show, these are work prints. These are not exhibition prints. On some I have exhibition prints, and it takes, for one image, for example, the one from Afghanistan with the light. This is an image that is really very complicated because you have light coming through, sunlight coming through the window, and you have a mud hut that is basically dark inside. There's no light inside. So the film covered actually quite, because of good exposure, you can get quite a lot of detail. But I can, for a print like this, an exhibition print, I need, in just exposing, to get a good print between 1 and 2 hours, sometimes 1 hour at least. And then you wash the print, you have to process it through 2 fixes, and then you have to wash it properly for 2 hours and selenium tone it and then dry it. So it's quite a really complicated process to do it properly, to do archival printing. And now I can do it on even the images. I scan it on my scanner. I work it on the computer, and I print it out on my inkjet printer and Epson print. Supposedly it's archival for 150 to 200 years with that, which is as much as you get doing it in a darkroom. So the quality is not quite there yet. It's almost there. For most people, they won't see the difference, but you still can see the blacks a bit richer. But generally, I must say, I don't miss being in the darkroom. If you've done it long enough and intensive enough, you don't miss that. But I can do everything, and I use the digital just the way I use the darkroom. It's nothing else. You sharpen, you make a bit light, a bit darker. For the color, you change a bit, intensify the color, take it back. So it's really, the process is exactly the same. So I don't feel any different using the digital compared to the analog. It's just a tool that you use and nothing else. And camera-wise, you can do anything with any camera. It doesn't matter. It's what you see or how you see. Naturally, the quality you get with a very good camera, you can get much more detail, much more depth than with a telephone photo. But certain sizes, it doesn't really matter much. So it's all in the eye of the photographer. So it's mine.
It's not only the eye, it's also the brain. Because how your brain is trained, it's different. That makes a difference. Being a curator of photography is one of the most complicated things, because photography is photography. So it's very complicated. So when I start working with, now I know your work almost perfectly, so I can tell everything about your work. But when I started working with that, I realized it's your brain training. Because reading, studying, it's a different story. Because you see because of your training, of how you read, how you see things. Because if you are not trained, you are not academically trained, your images can't be perfect, even if you have the latest Canon, Nikon, whatever. But My question, it's not really a question, it's the idea I started to work with your images for this exhibition people can see in that. I strongly believe there is a difference between you two. This is why I like this difference. Your images looks like a happy image, something you take because you like. His images are very strong, and they not only both of them, both of you have strong images, but the main idea is, I strongly believe as a photojournalist, and maybe I'm right, maybe not, you can tell me, as Baudrillard said, you take images of what you think it's possible to be better. You don't take images of what you like.
I don't quite agree with that. I mean, for photojournalism, yes, because if you cover an event or a war scene, you take the images that you feel will transport the message best. But it's also not just that. It's if you're in a situation where people are killed, or you see grieving families because the children have been shot, your camera is sort of a shield. It's between the event and yourself, because otherwise, if you would get too involved, you couldn't take the photo. You would just you couldn't take a picture. So basically, you have to have some distance, and the camera is like a filter in between, so you can you take part, but you try to transport the emotion you see through the image, and not be distracted by the emotion itself, because otherwise you couldn't take the photo. So it's sort of an emotional access you have while you photograph, and this is for photojournalism. Basically, for other photography it's the same. It's always the emotion you have. If it's a sad emotion or a happy emotion, it's basically you try to capture the moment, like Gallery said, the decisive moment, the emotion of the moment, no matter what it is. If it's a wedding photograph or children playing, it doesn't matter. It's always the same emotional thing. Photojournalism is just a bit harder, because if you see dramatic events, it affects you much more, I think, because we always then think this could happen to me too, so you are maybe a bit more affected by it.
I would like to disagree first, and then to agree, or even vice versa, with Rezwan. Why? Because yes, I agree that everything we read, everything we saw, everything, the movies, the places we have been, our training, our cultural background is reflected in the images we see, because we see first with our eyes, but the image is processed by our brain accordingly to all the informations we stocked over there in our subconscious part of the brain, and associate that moment or figure or happening with something that we would like to express. And here I disagree when you say that my images are happy. Yes, maybe they have happy moments, but they are always in black and white, and they have a dramatic contrast. And therefore, for me, photography is also a therapy. Why? Because I'm always happy. I'm always shining. Everybody says you're a source of energy, but somewhere all my bad feelings, because I'm human and I have emotions, and I'm sad, and sometimes I have sorrows. They are deep inside of me, and somehow they have to be released. And here, for me, photography is also a source of releasing sometimes the things I have inside, which maybe I cannot tell, or sometimes I cannot express. But through photography, we unleash everything we have inside, and we uncharge our soul. Therefore, I created these groups of photography. Why? I don't know if in photojournalism, and I'm sure it's not like this, but in street photography, when you go outside and you take images, you take also the energy of the people you take photos. And this energy, when it's a group of photographers going outside and capturing things, it's becoming like a big family of friendship and expressing themselves through these images, and finally managing to send some of the feelings to the viewers. And that's why for street photography, it's maybe much more than documenting streets, but actually taking the energy of the street and revealing it. And that's why I agree and disagree. Thank you so much.
Yeah, this is stupid. I will quote myself. Because you said this with the photography, it's for you like something it's relaxing you, it's making you feel better. I gave an interview about I never do digital photography, I always do on film. Why? Because this is what I said in that interview. Someone asked, why do you do on film? Because it's like gardening. I mean, it makes me relaxing in the dark room. You know, when I put the film, I measure the temperature of, probably very few or nobody knows something about Josef. I will reveal now. He was in New York, he was a printer. I mean, exactly that type of person who did the prints in the darkroom. So that was one of his jobs. So imagine how perfect he was in this technique. Because otherwise for New York Times or whatever, you can't do it. You have to do a perfect image. And what you said is perfectly true. I mean, it takes so much time because the image should be perfect. And in the dark, it's not the same like you scan the film. Okay, it's a trick. I do the film, but I scan the film.
Regarding to what Mirella was saying about the therapy through photograph, I was curious, what's your approach to street photography? I know you make these groups of walking and capturing photos, but when you're alone, oh yes, it starts raining.
Oh.
We can move inside if it's bad, but I think
it starts being bad.
It starts being bad. So in this case, I think we will invite you inside.
Fortunately, this institution is wonderful. So we have inside theater, we have outside theater, so we can invite you to inside to see the movie.
Yes.
And we have to, I mean, we wanted to invite you to ask some questions. We can do it inside.
Yes. Okay.